So we were talking before we recorded about a certain film festival that just happened in Austin recently, and I mention it because this premiered at, I think, arguably one of the big 5 film festivals at least in this side of the hemisphere. I'm surprised that it premiered at TIFF for a multitude of reasons, because it's not that it doesn't seem like a TIFF film, but I feel like this is more of a...
well, it's one of those like after dark situations.
Right. I guess I kind of would associate something like this more with like a butt numbathon. Like that's more of the audience for something like this. Not saying that people at TIFF don't want to see realistic gore of people having their fucking heads blown off and then run over. I'm not saying that, just because Canadians don't like guns don't mean they don't have some bloodlust in them. But I don't see this being a TIFF. I see this being more of actually like a South by Southwest more than a TIFF.
Yeah, it's funny. This film was part of the Midnight Madness section at TIFF in 2017, and it was one of my good friends. Peter Kaplowski is the programmer for Midnight Madness, and that was his first year. So this was among his first year selections for that program. I worked with him for a long time at Fantastic Fest, and we're just good friends. But that year also had movies like Bodied. It had Mom and Dad, the Nick Cage movie, the French Revenge film. It had a bunch of really solid ones. I think this is probably one of the most, no pun intended, explosive of the films that premiered that year at Midnight Madness.
Well, and I mean, it also has, what's funny, I didn't pick him twice this month, but this is the second Ryuhei Kitamura film I'm talking about this month. I talked about Versus earlier in the month. And it's interesting because it wasn't intentional, but I can see a lot of that movie in this movie just based on the way he used the gore, and a lot of the camera work is just, it's a lot. I mean, there's a lot going on with the camera work in this movie. And in Versus, there was a lot going on with the camera in that movie. So on this episode of the Culture Cast, I am Chris Dasher, the host, and I am joined once again by Josh Hurtado, all the way from movie land, being the one who just came back from South by Southwest. And then,
that's me.
Yeah. And then also joining us all the way from further east in the Midwest, and hasn't been here in quite some time, but I am happy to have them back, Jess Byard.
Hello.
It has literally been 6 months, so that's fun. It's wild. Actually, I don't even remember the last time you were on a Culture Cast. That's even crazy.
I could not tell you.
Yeah. Well, the timer has been set back to 0. The clock has been set back to 0 because we are talking on this episode for Splatter Month. Another Ryuhei Kitamura film, like we've mentioned, came out in 2017. It is called Downrange. you want to check this film out right now, it is currently streaming on Shudder. That is the only place that you can watch it, I think. I'm pretty sure, 99% sure, unless you go and illegally download it, which if you want to, go ahead. I'm not saying you shouldn't. The film is written by Ryuhei Kitamura and Joey O'Brien, and it stars I would say, fairly a disposable cast of young to mid-teen aged adults, younger adults, I guess. I don't know. These people seem to be in their late 20s, early 30s, maybe, whose car breaks down, but it turns out later their car is shot by a sniper hiding. That sniper then spends the next 90 minutes of the movie tormenting these poor people and causing them to have one hell of an afternoon in the middle of nowhere. So to kick the episode off, Josh, what did you think of Downrange?
I really liked Downrange. I thought it was fun. And for Splatter Month, I thought it was appropriately splattery. There was some, like you mentioned earlier, some good gore. There were tense moments. There were smart people doing stupid things, stupid people accidentally doing smart things, and lots of people getting brutally annihilated, frequently in ways that I was not expecting. So that's always fun.
What about you, Jess?
One, had realized that I'd already watched this movie when I went to watch it for this podcast. Look, I mean, I enjoy the subgenre of like Danger on the Road, right? Like The Hitcher, all of those good things. And I don't know if it's because I have just seen so many of them that it was fun. Yeah, the gore is great. The gore is awesome. It, to me, is not enough of an idea to be a full movie. It'd be a nice short. I think it'd be a great short. A 90+ minute movie, not so much. Chris, like you said, the cast overall is pretty disposable. And that is unfortunately the fine line that you have to toe when you're going to do a movie like this, which is one location, one set of characters, never leaving that location. Like, I love the trope of characters wake up in a room or are invited to a party and then have to fight their way out. I love that trope because we actually get into the characters' minds and we know more about them. And this, I couldn't tell you one thing about these people, including their names. I know nothing really aside from for some weird trauma bonding behind a car. So it was a good time to watch people's heads explode, but I think I'm past enjoying that just to enjoy that in my movie watching career.
So I had never seen it before, but to Josh's point, I think it's a very good entry into the subgenre of splatter, because if you're here for realistic gore and some well done gore, including an interesting homage to Texas Chainsaw with the first murder in the film, or the first death in the film that we see. And again, like it's all very well done. I also kind of fall into the same camp of, it's fun, but I think the third act of the movie kind of struggles in a way that's really hard to describe, because all of a sudden we have new characters show up who act really stupid, like in a way that is like, again, I'm not saying that our heroes aren't acting stupid, but like you mentioned, Josh, good, smart people doing stupid things and stupid people doing wildly idiotic things that are, shocking to behold, including a man not being able to hear people 10 feet from him for seemingly no reason. And then them keep screaming at him, calls someone, there's a sniper, and he just ignores. It's strange. And then the cops show up and it's like they're straight out of Keystone. I don't know. It's strange because I enjoyed the first 2/3 of this movie, but the third act, when we finally kind of ratchet up the stakes, as it were, and we have some more players coming into the set, this kind of very much a bottle movie, all of a sudden it makes our characters that have been hiding behind this car the entire movie, who have been attempting to not look like morons, and I think for the most part not, they look like the smartest people in the entire world compared to these other characters. And that's, again, when the third act is necessitated on new blood being put into the machine for us to have higher stakes, the stakes never really get there. Everybody is such a bumbling moron that you really don't think there's any threat to the nameless sniper other than possibly our heroes or the people who have been hiding behind the car, them possibly getting an opportunity to do something. Because I was convinced up until essentially the end of the movie that they were never going to get an opportunity to get anywhere close to this guy in the tree. And honestly, in a lot of ways, given the way the movie ends, which is fucking wild in a lot of ways, I kind of wish, given how the movie ends, that they had just never had the opportunity and this guy just, he walks away from everything at the end. Because in a way, that's kind of the ending the movie deserved, because this movie is very bleak. And I'm not going to say it's mean-spirited, but it kind of feels mean-spirited, which is fine. I mean, that's not a bad thing, but this is a very specific movie for a very specific audience, and certain people aren't going to want to watch this movie for a multitude of reasons. And one of them is this movie it pulls no punches. There is a 12-year-old girl or younger who just gets shot in the head in this movie. And I was like, okay.
Not before she goes flying out the window.
That was one of my favorite moments. The ejection of the little girl from the car.
It's fucking wild to me. Like, this movie is unhinged. I personally enjoy how subversive this movie. But I completely understand how somebody who watches this movie is going to be like, man, this is a real downer of a movie. But for me, again, I enjoy this movie. There's parts of this movie that it's just hard to wrap my head around some of these characters being that dumb. But I enjoy how fucked up this movie is because it really puts its characters through the ringer, like all the way to the point where, again, the ending of the movie is just, I wouldn't say I rolled my eyes, but it reminded me a lot of No One Gets Out Alive, where it's like, oh, that's how this movie's ending? Okay.
And just to be clear, I agree with every single one of Jess's criticisms, but I still enjoyed it. It would probably play better as a short film. There are a lot of things that they said that really made sense to me, but still, like it does some things that you aren't expecting it to do, which at this point in the sort of life cycle of these type of films, you would expect that you've seen pretty much everything, but this one goes some places that you don't really see coming.
And that's the thing. I totally agree with you on that. It is unlike any other, like the only other thing I've seen like it specifically is Phone Booth, in terms of like you have one character taunting this group of people, but again, like the stakes here I think are even more elevated than Phone Booth, and I love Phone Booth. It's a movie I saw at the right time, and I mean Colin Farrell's great in it, and Kiefer Sutherland plays that role that he's being asked to do perfectly. This is it. It reminded me of this. It's like, what if Phone Booth had some higher stakes? But at the same time, I wish I cared about the character a little bit more. But again, like I also understand, once again, these people are here to die. And so it's not really the director's intention to not give us anything. Like he doesn't give us anything about these characters for the most part intentionally. That's his intent, is to just, some of the characters have to just die immediately. And then the other ones, I wish I cared more when they died, but I understand why he doesn't want to do that.
Well, was this a writer-director situation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Co-writer. Yeah. Writer and he directed and co-wrote.
Well, and the film does that even so much as to create distance between the characters within the film, because this is kind of like a Craigslist carpool situation.
Right. Nobody knows each other.
Yeah, where they only there's like one couple, but no one else really knows each other in the car. And so even the people in the movie don't know the people in the movie.
Right.
Which is why I think that is such like a missed opportunity. Because look, like, yeah, it's a 90 minute-ish movie.
Yeah, somewhere there.
And yeah, we have this like kind of perfect setup to get to know these people, right? Like they're not buddies who are on, a cross-country road trip to go visit someone's dead grandpa, like in Texas Chainsaw. They're not, a family like in Dead End. They're strangers for the most part, aside from this couple. Ample opportunity to like really lay in some character details. And I think, like I get that that's not the point, and that's kind of like where I agree. It is a fun movie, and it is a great introductory for people who are like just getting into like splattery, crazy gory cinema. Great, awesome. But I am 34 and I have been watching this since I was like 16, and I'm just like, like I said, I'm in my like character development era or something. Like I'm just getting bored. Like okay, sure. Maybe the cop stuff at the end was kind of like what I was not expecting to happen. But even still, that's not that far out of the norm. There's always these situations where you're trapped in a house or abandoned property or on the road or something where you think like, oh, there's the cops. They're going to come save me. Here we go. They always get killed in some capacity. So like, I don't know, like aside from the family who just happens to be driving down the road and has what I think is the most hilarious sequence in the movie of crashing a car, because that's not, there we go. I wasn't expecting a gigantic car crash with explosions in this movie, but that's not enough. That wasn't enough for me to be like, okay, that's different enough. That's something new enough for my personal enjoyment. But again, I'm also like of the camp, like this movie's not necessarily for me. Like Chris said, it's for a very specific group of people. I think it's for two very specific groups of people. I think it's for introductory, like, okay, I'm just getting into horror. I want to give me some crazy stuff. I just want to watch people die. Awesome. Or it's just for like the hardcore fans who just really like this part of the subgenre. Like that's just their thing. They like all of this stuff. That's great. I have mine though. I have my own versions of that. I like asylum stuff. That's tropey as shit. Like we all have our subgenres that we cling to. And I think overall, when I think about like danger on the road type movies, they aren't ones that I've always like typically gravitated to. I enjoy them, but I do find them, like I said, kind of repetitive. I would like there's the real life version of like this whole conspiracy theory that there's this interconnected system of serial killers via truck drivers, right? That they all like communicate over CBs and commit these terrible crimes because it's easy to get away with. That I would like to see in my road movies more. And we get like the touch of serial killers here and there, but it's always very just the one off. Like it's Rutger Hauer on the street, on the road. It's, though I hate to reference this movie, it's The Creep on, from Jeepers Creepers. It's all of these different various things.
It's really unfortunate to have to caveat Jeepers Creepers anytime we talk about it. It really sucks because that's just...
It is.
It's one of my favorite horror movies.
That is one of my favorite road horror movies. And I really am just...
Yeah, it's unfortunate. So I'm going to ask both of y'all, have either of y'all seen anything else of Ruhei Kitamura's filmography? Like a Midnight Meat Train even? That's kind of, I guess that's kind of the other one, right?
I have seen Midnight Meat Train, which I do like, but I think that's more of Clive Barker than anything.
Yeah, Midnight Meat Train I've also seen. I've seen, what's the other one? No One Lives. I've seen No One Lives, which is between Midnight Meat Train and this. It's a few years before that. I've seen Versus. I'd seen a few of his Japanese films from 20 years ago. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at his filmography, and he's made a lot, and I've seen a little. I would say I've seen 4 or 5 of his features,
and that's the thing. I mean, with what I've seen of his movies, he really has, again, like even with the gore in something like Versus and the way it's done there, because again, I mean, that's a splatter film, and as much as this is, it's funny how. In that movie and in, the episode we did, my complaint was that movie's all over the place in terms of what it's trying to achieve. I mean, it's like insane how much stuff they kind of cram into that movie and it still more or less works. And then to your point, Jess, like to then pivot to something like this, which is literally like one sentence on a page, effectively. Like you can get the entire idea of this movie on.
Yeah, this movie is the log line, which is the kind of the ultimate point of a log line. But that's supposed to be the general idea. There should be more meat to the rest of the story, and I think it is important to note that like English is not the first language. Like he didn't start filmmaking with English speaking films. So I mean, there's something to say about that too, and the just type again, also just the type of movie that he was kind of looking to make. Like no fault if you're not really that invested in the characters and you do just want to make this movie about these people who are stuck on the side of the road and get picked off by sniper. Okay, that's fine. But I think there's, it's always kind of a missed opportunity when you have these kind of bottled movies that are entirely character driven. Like that is your whole thing you got going on there because nothing else is happening other than this one form of action that is causing all of the characters to react. And nothing of what they say really moves the plot forward because there really is no plot. It's just wait till the end to see if he kills everybody or if he gets killed.
Yeah, it is a movie of reaction. It's not a movie of being proactive. And the other co-writer, the co-writer, Joey O'Brien, if you don't know his work, like he has specialized over the years. I know Joey. He's a big fan of the same kind of Indian films that I am. So nice. I've met him. I showed a bunch of Rajamouli's films in LA at the American Cinematheque a couple of years ago now. And he came to all the screenings. Like he's a big fan from back in the day. But his features that he's written have all been for Asian directors. So he wrote Full Time Killer for Johnny To and Wai Ka-fai. He wrote Motorway for Soi Chiang a few years back. He wrote Triple Threat, which was that it was directed by Jesse Johnson, who's done a bunch of action stuff, low budget action stuff over here. But it was, Tony Jaa and Tiger Chen and Iko Uwais film from a few years ago. So action cinema is something that he knows. This one feels like it's it's written with a particular budget in mind, because that kind of, the one location thing really works for that. The, small cast really works for that. The only thing that kind of throws it off is that giant stunt at the end. But if that's the most expensive thing they're doing,
that's where all the money went.
They could probably get away with that one big, explosion, and who knows how much of that was real anyway, as far as explosions go.
Right. Well, I mean, it still costs money though.
Well, and some of the CGI towards the end of the movie is a little dicey. The car flip and some of the flames are, I mean, I'm not gonna say low budget, but of a budget that was restrictive and, like you said,
I mean, it is a low budget film. I think
it doesn't feel like it though. I mean, it really doesn't. I mean, there are parts that.
I think that has to do a lot with how great camera technology is at this point, right? Like, you can make a low budget movie and somebody has a red that they can borrow from their friend. It's gonna look fucking great. Like, if you do a good color correction on it, which this movie clearly has. Like, it looks nice.
It's the democratization of art.
Yes.
Anyone can make a great looking film. I do think, and I was trying to look this up. I do think that at the end, when the father in the car that explodes is walking across the road, I feel like that's a real full body burn. Like, I feel like
it looks like it.
Yeah, because that guy was a stuntman, so that might have even been the actor in the full body burn.
I would assume so. He had when, in my experience with working with stuntman, that man very much had stuntman essence to him. Like, and I think yes, writing with budget, and I think that that's kind of a trap that a lot of indie low budget films kind of fall into, is they get stuck in writing too much for budget, that they pair them, that they slip, like, just slim everything down too much for fear of over budgeting. But I think that's where you have to pivot that into your characters, though. It's not going to cost you more money to write dialogue. Like, that's a thing that your actors are there to do. And they have it's a decent sized cast for a one location, small cast movie. Like, it's not just two people. Like, look, like, my other trope that I enjoy are, people trapped in the water or on island facing sharks or crocodiles. And those are max 1 to 2 people most of the time. And generally, I have the same problem with characters in those movies. It's just that the thing that I like most is the shark and alligator attacks. So that's what I'm there for. So I have my little worlds that I enjoy in that too. But even after a while, I can only watch so many killer shark and alligator movies, because they fall into the same issue here, is that it's just not that interesting of a concept to hold for 90 minutes or more.
I feel like with the characters in this film, as we've mentioned on a couple of occasions here, there's not a whole lot of development going on. But I do feel like there is just enough, not necessarily development, but exposition, about who the characters are, to throw some red herrings at the audience. Like the character who is, she's an army brat, and she's the one who's sort of steering the boat and telling everybody how to stay alive. The impression that we get, even though it seems a little bit too obvious or on the nose, is that she's the one that's going to make it out. Like, she's the one that's going to be the final girl, and she almost gets there and then doesn't. And it's this other one who's kind of skittish and didn't really know what was going on, that ends up, not really being the final girl, because she doesn't make it out either. But the finalist girl, she is the most final girl of the group. The penultimate girl, is that a thing?
I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah. Well. I mean, I sucked the least at surviving girl.
Yeah. Right. Well, and that's the thing about the movie, and with having that fake out, which reminded me a lot of Feast. When you have the same thing happen in Feast, where you have the one character acting all badass, and I believe he's like a soldier or ex-military, that creature just grabs him and kills him, right?
See, and that's a great vehicle for that type of movie too, because you get those stats, right, for each character, and that makes it fun. That makes it, and I think, like Chris, you were saying, it's kind of a down, it's a downer of a movie. And, I think that's fully intentional. It's not, it doesn't want to have any kind of goofy, I don't know, splat. When I think of splatter movie, I usually think of something that's got some kind of levity in there too. If I think slasher movie, not always levity. This I don't know because, like, Josh, you were saying the co-writer wrote a lot of action movies, and that I can see. Like, I did not know that previously, and that definitely makes a lot of sense, and that I see translating on the screen a lot, especially with the end car stunt. But this one I don't quite know because it's not like I guess the closest it is to like Hitcher or Joyride or something, right? Where it's just a killer that's just killing because they are.
Right.
There's no reason they can. There's no reason. You're never going to figure out the reason. You can, assume various things based on when you actually get to see who the killer is or what they look like anyway.
I mean, I think going back to the way that, and I'm forming these thoughts on the fly, listening to everyone and sort of putting things together. There are some things that the script does that are clever. Like it sets up, you've got these 6 people in this car, three women and 3 men. As Chris was mentioning at the beginning, they get a blowout, which turns out not to be actually a blowout. They find out later on. And then the men are all trying to be studs about changing the tire. The women are goading them about, how long it's going to take them. And eventually the task falls to like the muscle bound guy, the muscle bound guy, or the muscliest guy ends up being the one that they task with changing the tire. And, knowing the kind of movie that we're going into, we know that people are going to die and someone's going to have to be there toward the end to help them get through. And the muscle bound guy seems like he might be a safe bet to last a little while. And he turns out to be the first one down. And then from there on out, it kind of telegraphs from the beginning that there are no rules to this. Some of the acting is kind of here and there. Some of the characters do just fine. The Karen, the army brat girl, I think that she's pretty good at the character that she's playing. And the one guy that you were mentioning who gets stuck behind a tree stump, he was a bit much.
He's a lot much. He makes the worst decision at every opportunity he gets, including the decision to run away as opposed to run to the car. I mean, I don't think the outcome would have been any different, but in that scene where they're like, all right, the car is moving, make a break for the car, and he just goes the other way was just shocking to me. Like, Jesus. It's literally like a scene from Scary Movie all of a sudden, like, death? Life. I'm just going to take off towards death, apparently. It was surprising. Yeah, he's one of the few characters in this movie that's like, you're the reason you're dead at this point. Like, you've made the poor choices that are hard to justify.
Yeah, all true.
But I will say, if we're talking about just the successes of the movie, as someone who, and I'm kind of in a similar camp with Jess in terms of like, I'm at the point where I'm not super into gore, but I've also never really had my time to be into the gore of any of these movies. Like, that's never been a thing that I have gone out of my way to look for. So I
hold on. I feel like I should clarify. I love gore.
Sure, no.
I just need more than gore to carry a story.
And I'm agreeing. Like, I'm kind of in the same boat now. I mean, I would say, kind of for me, one of my biggest problem with Halloween Kills was a complaint that I would have with this movie, which is like, the gore was great, but in terms of like character development and story, I mean, I kind of am, it's lacking there, but at the same time, the gore is really good and the kills are really good and they're really well done, at least for me. And
I did really enjoy the car careening through the already dead bodies.
That was pretty amazing.
and that for me is the mean-spiritedness of the movie on display, right? Like, oh, they're already dead, and here we're just gonna have their bodies smashed and mutilated even more.
And like you were saying, the kills are good. The very first one that I was mentioning about the guy who was attempting to change the tire, when it reveals that he is dead, it does that little pullback camera where it pulls through the bullet wound in his head, which is super cool. There are and that's really, that guy probably got, the best death in the movie because no one else dies that cleanly. Everyone else, it takes a couple of hits or a combination of explosions or, being ejected from a car window plus a bullet wound. Like, everyone else has to suffer before they die, but he's just gone. So good on him, for that. But yeah, there are lots of sort of creative things in the film that, like you were mentioning, the camera work earlier. The camera is a character in the film at times, and sometimes it just feels pretty observational. But that particular reveal of like this, it reveals the situation. Basically, is what happens.
Right.
What's happening. And it is also pretty clever that it's revealed that he's dead after he's dead. And so there's this conceit through the first 30 minutes of the film that there are people dying, but there are no gunshots because, it's later revealed that Army Brat can tell what all the guns sound like and can tell how old they are from the gunshots. Great, cool. But he's been using a silencer, and that's why these people are just sort of like falling out of nowhere. It takes them a while to figure out what's going on.
And that's the other thing I think that you kind of touched on, Josh, is the thing that Ryuhei Kitamura now I've seen in a lot of his movies is this camera work and a lot of this like really interesting frenetic camera work, but not frenetic in the way that like a Transformers is, where everybody is kind of having a hard time keeping track of what's going on. He's cutting away to things very quickly in a way that, again, like he has an eye for this that I really appreciate, as much as that the movie does lack in certain areas in terms of it feeling like a fast-paced movie where, like you mentioned, the camera in a lot of ways is its own character. I think it succeeds in that in spades. And I think that this is the perfect kind of movie to do it in, because I really like the reveal of the sniper where we kind of see him and then we go in on it and then it freezes and holds and then it fades out. Like they give these moments a little bit of time to breathe. Not everything, but some of the moments they do. But again, the thing that with the clean kill in the first kind of act of the movie, it's that for me is where I sit and I go, okay, so you've got all these really great kills in this movie and the gore is great and the camera work is great. So for me, again, like that, if those boxes are checked, I'm on board. And again, like you've mentioned, Josh, like there's some creativity here with what they're doing. I mean, I've never seen anybody get cauterized with the end of a hammer before. So that's a thing. I mean, the kid being ejected from the car is pretty wild. We get to see a kind of nod to the lobster hand from, I think, is that Saw 6 or 7, where they have to saw their hands. That's what happens to the woman driving the car. Yeah.
It's the most ridiculous response to just keep driving recklessly forward toward a very clear situation in front of her instead of just slamming on the brakes and being like, my fucking hand is in half now.
Yes, she lost her goddamn mind immediately.
Her dad couldn't even get the car away from her. He's got one hand.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Like, I don't think this movie is particularly funny in like a haha way, but I do find a lot of it to be like, now that I've seen it a couple times, like a lot of it is like comically fucked up. Like the bad decisions that are made are kind of hilariously bad, and including the stuntman playing the dad screaming at the top of his lungs, like, "What are you saying?" It's like, why hasn't this guy been shot yet? But I mean, again, like, I don't know how funny this movie is supposed to be, but at the same time, like, I kind of feel like it is almost verging on black comedy in spots because of how ridiculous it is. And I don't know if this is a Tommy Wiseau thing where it's like, well, we didn't intend for it to be funny. It just happened that way. Like, I kind of feel like some of this was very intentional. Like, obviously, the way the movie ends, where she kills herself by accident because she gets really mad at him. Like, it's like, if that sob echo didn't happen at the end of the movie, as the subtitles so clearly showed, I would have thought that this movie's ending was a lot funnier than it's trying to be. Because the ending of this movie is kind of pitch black funny if you think about it, right? Like, it is pretty fucked up in a funny way. But the movie doesn't play it that way, I guess, is kind of what I'm getting at. And I kind of wish it had leaned into that a little bit, because it is there subtextually throughout the.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a certain type of person, myself included, and perhaps Jess, you as well, that talked about how we enjoy the gore. Like, there's nothing that will get me to laugh, guffaw, like ridiculously loud in a theater, more than a well executed gore gag. Like something that is just so over the top that you're like, I can't believe they just did that. And in wildly inappropriate films often too. I remember going to see, the press screening for Hereditary, and the moment that he drives past that telephone pole, I lost it in the theater and started laughing while everyone else was just like, they're gasped,
horrified,
and then just me laughing my ass off, because that's good. Or in Midsummer, when they have to smash the guy's head with a hammer because he didn't die when he fell off the cliff, laughs, just burst out laughing in that. So that kind of stuff really, really gets me. And so I'm like, good for you, movie. You got me. Like, thanks for that. I appreciate it. I wasn't expecting to see that. You surprised me.
And look, I don't think, I don't think we've touched on it yet, but there is a little bit of leaning into the reality of it all. And I'm not talking about like the reality of being in this situation, but the reality of the world that we live in this country, at least, being Americans, unfortunately. Gun violence is such a thing, like constantly is ever present. I mean, Josh, I mentioned the Allen Outlet Mall, and everybody knows what that is now for the worst fucking reason possible. It just used to be an outlet mall 10 minutes from where my parents live, like that I've been to a million times.
The shooter for that lives like 2 miles from my house. So, it's a lot of those things and I'm a school teacher. And so every time there's something going on, like my school has been on lockdown at least once a year for the last few years because of whether, real or imagined or threats or whatever. So yeah, gun violence is definitely a thing that we live with in ways that I don't know about you. I'm older than both of you, but I never expected this. I had just graduated from high school. I was out of high school for about a year and a half when Columbine happened. So that felt like a new phenomenon. I mean, people had been shot in schools before that. It's not like a completely new, but like on that scale, that was new. Like that had never happened before. And so, I graduated in 97, that was in 99. And I thought like maybe I'd cleared that bar. And then of course I took a job teaching, I've been in high schools for 12 years and kind of, every time the news pops up, I get texts from my parents and my wife asking, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And it's weird that my job is dangerous. That's it's a strange thing,
It's unfortunate that it's dangerous because you're not paid enough for how dangerous it is, unfortunately.
Well, I'm not paid enough for a lot of things that I do.
Yeah, sure. But, when they're trying to get guns in the hands of teachers, But I mean, some of the movie does kind of traffic in that. And again, like, to mention the movie's kind of perverse and fucked up and funny in its own way. But at the same time, like, I think the movie does a really good job at establishing a fair amount of tension with what's going on. And like we've kind of already alluded to, the idea that like at any point in this movie, anybody could go. And I like that about a movie because I hate plot armor in movies. I mean, I still, speaking of plot armor, I still remember, Jess, you and I watching Game of Thrones and texting back and forth about the plot armor in the last season of that show.
Yeah.
And it's, there's none of that here, which I appreciate because, I mean, again, yes, the characters are disposable. No, we don't know much about them, but at least, like they have no plot armor whatsoever. At least there's none of that here. And for a movie like this, where the killer is hiding in a stationary spot 99% of the movie, and we know nothing about him other than he is a sadist of the extreme variety, I think that it does more or less work. I think, though, again, if you come back to the idea of, well, these characters are disposable, then we don't need to do anything about it. Sure. But I think the disposable nature of the characters, I mean, again, I don't think they make it, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. I have a hard time balancing the scales of, is the tension valid and justified when I don't care about the characters and it's just the situation and I'm imagining myself in the situation? That is, I think, what the movie's biggest success is it puts you in the situation with them, and maybe it doesn't make you sympathetic for them because in a lot of ways, it's not that they're not sympathetic. They make such bad fucking decisions repeatedly. It's hard to not root for them, but it's hard to not be like, well, I don't know how any one of you have made it this far anyways, as it is. But I think that's the thing for me. The movie's biggest success is really making it feel like you're there with them, which, I mean, again, this kind of movie, it almost has to be a success of the movie for it to be one worth watching.
And I feel like you're right. The part of it's no, there's not a lot of characterization going, but that does lend the film and the characters a bit of sort of anonymity, that they are kind of like just the everyman.
Right.
So, there's nothing to really attach the audience to the characters in terms of like who they are, their interior lives or their motivations or whatever. But there's also really not that much to separate them from us either. Like we could, just like you were saying, easily be that person. And the fact that, as you were saying also, this sniper is stationary. So it really feels like it's kind of like a writing exercise in and of itself to say, okay, well, we're going to have a stationary sniper. How do we make this feel dangerous for more than just a few minutes?
Right.
And so the threat evolved, throughout the course of the film. Once he realizes they're behind the car and he takes that suppressor off so that the bullets can be more powerful, then they start shooting through the car. Well, then they discover, oh, well, the bullets aren't going all the way through the car, so we're safe back here. And then eventually the bullets do start coming through the car. And then they run out of water. They do all these other things that they think are keeping them safe, and ultimately realizing that nothing is really going to keep them safe forever.
Right.
And so it does make some smart moves in that way. So it's just, I think, there's a world in which, this is whatever, it's 92 minutes. It's right at that somewhere. There's a world where a 10-minute shorter movie paces up much better, and is more successful, and there are less chances for people to start picking holes in it. But I think it does a pretty good job. And, like you're saying, that third act where they do sort of ratchet up the stakes by adding in new characters. The family in the car kind of takes care of themselves. So that's
that's on them. I don't know whose fault that is. That mom just didn't know how to drive very well.
Yeah. But when the cops show up, the cops feel like they're going to be a force to at least mitigate the circumstances of the people that are stuck there. And then that goes very badly also. And in fact, the only actor that I recognized in the entire film was Graham Skipper, who was the cop that was in the passenger seat of the truck, because he's in every horror movie. And he's a director and an actor and all this other stuff, and super cool guy. I've had a couple of conversations with him.
So he's from our neck of the woods, right? Or my used to be neck of the woods.
Yeah. Well, he's in Texas now. I think he lives in Austin. But like he's always got some movie going on. He makes like 3 or 4 movies a year. He's done. One of the fun things that he's done is anytime they have, like at South by Southwest, they have activations. So they have these big promo launch events for new and upcoming films. And so when they do those, like there was one for The First Omen, which is coming out next month, where it was like a First Omen confessional booth where you have to go to the confessional booth and they scare the shit out of you in the confessional booth. And then another film that premiered at South by Southwest was Immaculate, the new Sydney Sweeney nun movie. And they had a team of like a dozen like evil nuns that showed up at the screening to like sort of be this intimidating force or whatever. And he directed those things. He also like directs big haunted houses and plays and stage stuff. He was in Reanimator the musical. And he's done a bunch of other stuff. And so I was kind of like, oh, it's Graham when he's in the movie for whatever it is, 5 minutes before he gets brutally murdered. But so it's the only person that I really recognized was this one guy who's just in everything. But I tried to look up the other actors, and like nothing rang a bell to me for when I looked through some of the other IMDb listings for any of the other performers in the film. They all kind of looked like somebody, but they weren't exactly the person. They were like celebrity doubles. They're
like
just a little off.
Timu. We have these at home.
Yeah.
Timu actors.
The Wish version of all these actors.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, in a lot of ways, the funniest part about this movie, even though the characterization is not great, all the characters have some really weird dialogue. And the further you get into the movie with the new characters that are introduced, their dialogue, especially the mom and the dad, calling each other mommy and daddy, wake up, daddy, wake up. It's just so, I don't know. It's bizarre. But again, like it's funny. And like you said, Josh, they kind of end up being their own worst enemy. But the cops feel like the cops had to be so worthless because, again, like we've mentioned, it's a stationary position. So the cops shouldn't have any problem. Like we have 2 guys with sniper rifles sitting there that both do nothing other than one falls out of the car and gets shot by the sniper, and then the other one just dies in the bed of the truck. I'm surprised that they brought characters like that into the movie because you would think it wouldn't work. And I'm not saying it does work, but I don't think this is the wrong way to do it. I just think the movie didn't make it clear that these guys aren't bumbling morons. I'm not saying they had to be bumbling morons, but these guys are, and it's kind of ridiculous how bad of cops they are, especially given that they're supposed to be sharpshooters, or they're just the two dudes who walked into the weapon room at the police station and got the sniper rifles. I mean, these cops are as inept as the cops in The Hitcher. The cops in the helicopter in The Hitcher, they get blown out of the sky by Rutger Hauer. It's like, these are the same people. It's like the same police
the Keystone
force.
Cops.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, again, like there's a way to do that for it to be kind of actually ratcheting up the tension, but it ratchets up the stakes more than anything else. But I don't think it ratchets up the stakes for our characters, because by halfway through the second act of the movie, I was like, there's no way anybody gets out of this alive. There's literally, unless there's some fucking magical thing that happens at the end of the movie, there's no way. The movie didn't prove me wrong, but again, like they can't get past the tension. They just have to ratchet up the stakes by having new cars come in. So yeah. Go ahead.
To your previous point, Chris, about plot armor, I would argue that plot armor doesn't exist in movies like this. Like most road movies, your characters kind of all end up dead
or like
severely fucked up irrevocably. Yeah, exactly. Like they're in these types of movies, I don't think like plot armor exists in such a way that like they do in like a slasher movie, where you very much know who usually the final girl is going to be, or in any other type of horror movie, like say a supernatural horror movie about a family, like the kid's probably going to be fine at the end, like whatever fine is, but fine at the end, like. But I think generally, though, with Keystone Cops, at least like from the the references I immediately think of examples of Keystone Cops is like a character trope, are generally arriving to provide some levity in a very weird, gross situation. I mean, think about even Last House on the Left has moments where we go over with these cops. Or is it Last House, or is it I Spit on Your Grave, where it's the weird cutaways to the cops and this like goofy music, like joyful music, while they're just fumbling. I can't remember which one, but either way, Last House, not a funny movie, not even a little bit, not even if you're really trying really hard to make it a funny movie, not a funny movie. But it has these weird scenes of these Keystone Cops that are just fucking up, trying to find this poor girl who's been kidnapped. And for those of you who don't know what it is, and trigger warning, it is a rape revenge movie. So not a fun time we're having here. And then we just cut away to these like doofy little cops in their cop car, like smacking each other and having a good little time. So most of and even what's it called? The one about Texarkana.
Oh, The Town That Dreaded Sundown.
Yeah, The Town That Dreaded Sundown. That has a bunch of little weird Keystone Cop movies. Also not a movie that's like particularly funny or should be particularly funny. So yeah, I just think it's interesting because I do feel like these cop characters in this movie are supposed to be that. I think Graham Skipper being one of them kind of makes it feel even more like they're supposed to be Keystone Cops, because he's the one person that you recognize, and he's typically kind of a goofy guy. So, but it doesn't go for it all the way in that respect. So they just kind of end up being like, why are you here for 5 minutes?
I mean, it does. The only thing that it really does is it kind of underlines the nihilism of the film. The nihilism of the shooter is that he doesn't give a shit who's there. Right. He's just out there doing his thing. It could be a cop, it could be the Pope, it could be a 12-year-old girl. That's what he had, penciled on his calendar for Saturday, was perch in a tree and shoot everyone he sees.
Right. And to go to a movie that is beloved like Scream and talk about, that movie going as far as to say, there is no motive. The lack of motive is the scary part. I mean, that is what, again, that for me is the movie's success is making this feel real, which it feels real in the sense that, like, again, like we mentioned with the real life things, people are killed with wanton abandon all the time by people like this. And it is unfortunate that it happens a lot in our country and that we have not done anything about it. But it's the lack of remorse that is scary. It's the lack of any sort of like soul or anything that makes it truly scary. And I think that is a success here. The character of the sniper, I think, is a very successful idea. And I would like to see somebody else do something with it. I mean, I know there's the movie that came out a couple years ago about the DC snipers, which was pretty well done. But I mean, I'm talking more in like a horror movie setting, because I can't really think about or think, come to my mind immediately one of these kinds of movies that isn't based on real life events. I mean, I know there's the movie that's dramatization, fictional retelling of what happened in Austin, but nothing imminently jumps to mind immediately of a movie about a sniper sitting and waiting and shooting. That's like a subgenre in and of itself is what it feels. Because like there aren't a lot of movies like this. I mean, there are lots of road movies. I agree with you, Jess. But in terms of like a movie where we have a sniper just picking people off for an hour and a half, I don't know if there are any other than like even in Phone Booth, not a whole lot of people die. Like this movie is like there's a high body count here, and it's even implication of a higher body count.
In Phone Booth, it's calculated. I mean, it's calculated more than like
He's
this
teaching
is
him
like
a lesson.
Teaching him a lesson. Yeah, exactly. These people are just random. Like they're just a purely random situation. Right. And I mean, I do think, that is scary, because that is, what we haven't mentioned, but I'm sure the audience listeners have put it together. Where they are stranded is a wide open desert area. So there's no running behind trees or anything to like shield yourself. So you don't know, like you can't outrun that type of, weapon, right? Like you don't know what direction, and he can easily pivot his direction no matter where you're going, because he, for what we know, is probably some sort of like ex-Navy SEAL or something like this, with like
heavily alluded to
super, high profile military type killer. Like that seems what this person is supposed to be. And I think that, that is very scary. And again, I think, I don't know, like, I'm not saying it's a bad movie. I'm just saying for me, I needed a little more to care about, like, because maybe it is because I'm so desensitized. Maybe this is a telling of America, that I'm so desensitized by gun violence that I actually need to care about these people to actually care about it. Right. Like,
yeah.
I need to know who these people are for it to affect me in some way in this movie. Not in real life, I'm not saying that, but I think like that is kind of an American perspective, right? Like people die in this country every damn day of gun violence and a variety of other things. And we hear about it all the time, and people are dying all over the world currently right now in very, catastrophic, awful ways. And no one cares unless they hear a very personal story.
Yeah, and we've reached a point where this happens with such regularity that, and I'm guilty of this as anyone else is, when there is some sort of event, which I'm sure there'll be one here soon, because that's just how things happen. I am the bad person who immediately goes to read the news and find out who did this and why they did this. Like, do we know what the cause is? Do we know was this was there a manifesto? Was there some kind of story? Was this person bullied? Was this person homophobic? Was this person transphobic? Was this person racist? Do we have evidence of that? Was this person on the dark? Right. And there is something to not having any of those answers that makes this especially terrifying. And one of the things this actually we were talking about this a moment ago, that the very first documented real school mass shooting, I had to look up the name, but I did remember the story, was Brenda Ann Spencer, who was just like some 16-year-old girl who was just shooting kids at a school across the street from her house. And when they asked her why, she said, I don't like Mondays. I hate Mondays. Like that was her explanation, And that kind of feels like the same story we might get out of this guy. Like I said, maybe he's just like, oh, well, it's Saturday. It's time to go shoot some people on the road,
Right.
And the implication is he's done it so much. Like,
yeah.
Like he didn't just wake up today and go kill people. Like his gun would imply that this has at least been going on for some time.
Well, and the memorial at the beginning of the movie, we see that there's the standard, like people leave things on the side of the road where someone has died. And that kind of just leads me to, ask more questions as to how often has this happened and how has nobody noticed? Because does he get rid of the bodies after the fact and all of the car refuse and all of those things? I mean, I guess he'd have to if absolutely no one has been investigating this situation of multiple people being gunned down. But also someone knew because someone put a memorial down, unless he's putting the memorial down. That could be a thing.
It would be, at this point, it feels as though clearly he does not care about the repercussions of his actions because he's not cleaning all that mess up. There's too much, one person you could probably get away with, cleaning up whatever's left over from that in an area like that where it's all dust and dirt and concrete and asphalt. But he just killed like 9 people, and there are heads and brain matter all over the place. That's a lot of bleach.
Right.
Yeah. And you need a tow truck to get that car out of there. And now you've
3 cars. He's got to get rid of 3 cars.
3 cars now. Well, I mean, he wasn't planning on the other 2.
Right.
Well, and see, that's the funny thing about kind of, again, this sniper character. It does feel like these 4 people, regardless of how we look at it, because again, yes, everyone in the movie that we see dies, period. Point. Nobody lived. It does, again, like through the entire film, every action that they take does lead to the sniper finally meeting his end. Like, again, through the way we see the movie, if they had done something differently and they'd written it differently, sure. But these 4 people or 6 people or 9 people end up being this one guy's undoing, but that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot to get to that point, to be able to have the guy hanging upside down from the tree and then having his head caved in. So, I mean, in terms of like, I think if anything, any of the majority of the characterization in this movie is probably given to the sniper, if anything else, just by the way he does what he does and the way he treats the people in this movie. Because again, like we kind of mentioned, the first guy is the only one who really is lucky. Everybody else dies in some fucking horrifying ways. And the one guy, the guy who's hiding behind the stump, he gets shot how many fucking times? Like 6 or 7 times, to the point where he just dies because he runs out of blood. Which, I mean, again, like in this, it's like that's the worst way to go, except for the other person who is alive until she gets her head blown off after she's shot through the eye. It's like all of these are terrible. So, but again, like I think for me, like that just leads me to feel even more disgust towards the sniper character. But that's the characterization is really, this is the killer's move, right? Like,
well, I mean, we didn't mention that the guy that you're mentioning who gets it the worst is also our only POC in the entire movie.
This is very true. And he's also very whiny. And it also, that characterization. And he's, again, a member of a more or less anonymous group or group of people who are strangers and is left out of or feels left out of the conversation.
Oh, yeah. They left him across the road real fast.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, no, sorry. You can't hang out with us behind the car.
And then when he does, it takes a long time for him to die, as you mentioned. And one of the cruelest moments in the film is, for me, was when they toss him a bottle of water and he starts to drink the water. Oh, they toss it
so far away.
And he gets it, and then he starts to drink it, and the shooter shoots the bottle of water out of his hand. So just like underlining, there will be no relief from this pain. There'll be no relief from what you're going through. The cruelty is the point, as the people say these days.
Yeah, because he proved with the first kill and with his, he's a sniper. He could easily kill them all in a matter of like seconds.
Yeah.
And be done with it. But that's not the point. And that is, a terrifying thought.
Right. Yeah. That is, I think, for me, like the ultimate success of the movie is just allowing me as the viewer to feel like I'm there with them and watching as this group utterly is, just picked apart and destroyed by this, again, sadist of a human being. But at the same time, like, we don't get to see these kinds of movies very often told from the killer's perspective effectively. Like and again, I'm not saying we needed to be over his shoulder the entire movie, but whenever they stand up or move, we are anticipating he's going to do something. And for the most part, he does every time. The times he doesn't are the times that feel more pointed than anything else. Like when he lets the guy walk and fix his girlfriend's thing and put it over her head. Like he lets him do that. And then he murders him, obviously. But again, it's those weird moments that the killer lets them have that feel more pointed because again, like everyone's mentioned, this guy, he's not killing you on purpose. He's making you suffer intention, like you said, Josh. And that's, again, it's hard to swallow that, but that's like, it's a brutal movie for a reason.
I mean, and there's actually, this is somewhat of a tangent, but there is a film that just played at Sundance, which does kind of do the thing that you're talking about. Ironically enough, it was executive produced by Peter Kaplowski, who I mentioned earlier is the programmer of Midnight Madness at TIFF, called In a Violent Nature. That is like a slasher from the slasher's point of view, but it's not like a faux documentary type, like Leslie Vernon, the Leslie Vernon film or something like that. Apparently, it's more just like following the killer as the killer does killer stuff. And
so like
people
Maniac,
have said that,
or like Henry.
Yeah, something like that. But it's from what I understand, it's more of like a Jason type killer, like not a particular, like a nonverbal type. This is my understanding. I haven't seen the film yet, but it's supposed to be very good. And it also say the gorehounds out there will enjoy the fact that it's supposed to have some really good kills, some very unusual, fresh kills. So I'm looking forward to seeing that, honestly.
I mean, for me, these are the kinds of movies that I think resonate with me more now at this point. Cause again, like I don't want to read about it in real life because it's too much of a fucking drag, but I'll watch the movie. I'll watch that movie about the killer. Cause at one point in my life, I really didn't like Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. Now it's a movie that like, I'm not going to say I'm going to throw it on when my folks are in town to have a great time, but it's definitely a movie that like I have a much higher appreciation for now for a whole host of reasons that the first time I saw it, I did not appreciate at all. And this movie in a lot of ways has that same level of nihilism of like, just buckle up because there's nothing, you're not going to have a fun time with this the way you think you will. You'll have an interesting time with the characters, but this is not a fun movie in the way that like Henry's. No. It has that same mix of like just a lot of nihilism being thrown at you at once and the movie not pulling any punches and not holding back. Because Henry has the same thing, Maniac has the same thing, and this has the same thing. I'm like, to the end, there's no release valve. The end of the movie is literally the release valve. The movie ending is the release valve.
Yeah, and I think that, if there's one thing that the film has its shortcomings, but one thing I think it does really well is it presents an atmosphere of anxiety. Like there's anxiety. The film is a very anxiety-ridden film. There's not a moment where you're not watching this and kind of wondering what's going to happen next because it is so unpredictable. And like that's fun. Like that keeps you riveted through the slower narrative moments, because it's only slow because they're lulling you. It's rope-a-dope, they're lulling you into a false sense of security that you might get through this, and then something horrible happens that you didn't see coming. Like you might have thought of 1,000 different variations of a way a particular moment might play out, and this movie tends to do the 1,001st thing in that list,
including ignominiously killing off the character that is believed to be I would agree, like the army brat is almost what is assumed to be the main character, and I think she gets the most ignominious death of anybody. She just like literally, I was like, oh, she's just fucking dead. Oh, okay. Like that might be the most shocking moment in the entire movie for me, is just watching the character that we feel like is going to be the final girl just die. And it's just not even any attention's really given to it. Like, but I think also like I appreciate that because I think it further reinforces the movie's point, which is like anybody at any point can die. And that's the point. And you're not even going to have a moment to mourn them. The fact that some of the characters get that moment is not guaranteed. The killer is just doing it because he's just a piece of shit. Like that's really all it boils down to. But yeah, it's that moment where she dies and just gets headshotted while running was shot. I was shocked because again, like in a movie of things that are more or less shocking, like that was the most shocking moment, and it's not even gory or anything. She gets shot while running from behind, effectively.
Yeah, I totally agree. I did not see that coming, and when it happened, I kind of didn't believe that it happened, because at that point, then we're left with the one character who seems like the least likely to survive a film like this. Yeah. Not because, it's not, they're not typical slasher rules. She's not sleeping around. She's not doing a bunch of drugs. She's not anything. That's kind of the point, is that she is the most anonymous of the characters. The character, it's not that she has no agency, it's that she doesn't exercise any agency. Like she doesn't seem to be much of anything until the end, where she kind of feels like there's nothing left to do. And she just runs towards the danger, which ends up ending the danger. but also, ending herself, because at that point, all the things that have been going on inside of her are now, being expressed in this manic rage that she cannot control, which leads to her own death, because she overkills. The guy is clearly dead, but she just can't seem to stop herself.
Right.
It is that one last one that's the one that gets you, the one last swing.
And she feels like you kind of alluded to, Josh. She feels like the audience analog in a way. Like she is, because at one point she reacts the way I think most people would react in this situation, where she just sits and starts rocking back and forth on the ground as everything's happened. And mind you, the sniper doesn't kill her for whatever reason. I mean, again, for whatever reason, we don't know why. I mean, I could draw a million reasons, a million conclusions as to why, and they're all pretty fucking sadistic, which is like to clearly leave this one for the end. Like, again, like that's what it feels like. But yeah, the only way the moment at the end of the movie happens is if we have the character who has no idea how guns work, swinging a gun with a bullet effectively in the chamber, more or less. It's like one of the most shockingly idiotic things I've ever seen a character do in a movie. And also, it's fucking contrived as far as I'm concerned. But I mean, it works. Like you mentioned, her anger and inability to move on ends up costing her. But I think that's the movie, the ending the movie deserved in a lot of ways. It's like The Mist, right? Like maybe there are cops coming right over the hill 2 seconds after this happens. Like that for me would have been the funnier thing. Instead of having the end of the movie end with her sobs echoing, just have it end with like sirens in the distance. And it's like, shit.
A fucking helicopter.
Yeah, or something like, and it's like, oh, so she was almost saved too, on top of like just missed it by that much. Like that, I think that would be the most nihilistic moment if they had gone that far.
That's my favorite death trope. I almost made it to the end.
Well, or the dream sequence where you survive, but you're not really, but you end up dying anyway. Like the Descent ending, the original Descent ending.
Yeah.
Or the original. Well, I guess Nightmare on Elm Street kind of does both. The OG Nightmare.
I mean, it's up to your interpretation how that.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask both of y'all, since we've kind of been talking, broadly, but more specifically about this splatter movie. What are some other splatter movies that resonate with y'all that you would maybe suggest if people are looking to watch splatter movies or kind of go further down this path? That might be something worth checking out. As of the things that I've watched this month, like I've mentioned, talked about Versus, did an episode on Blood Feast as well. So those two have been covered. But anything else that jumps out at y'all that are worth splatter for the splatter people, either the ones who are wanting to get into it or maybe the people that already enjoy it?
I mean, there's one that we are going to talk about next week, so I'll hold off on that one.
What are we talking about next?
Street Trash.
Street Trash.
Oh,
the one.
One of my favorite films. There's the sort of the splat stick stuff, the Brain Dead, Dead Alives, the early Evil Deads, those are good fun. I have a soft spot for those. I have a soft spot for really any Sam Raimi film. They all are enjoyable to me on different levels. If you're looking for the hardcore splatter sort of nihilistic thing like this, you can go with there's always the late 80s, early 90s sort of German splatter stuff. If you really want to go for something that has no moral compass at all, stuff like Olaf Ittenbach's films, Burning Moon, Prometheus, those kinds of things they're nothing more than just excuses to carve up fake bodies and show really gross stuff, which is sometimes fun on its own as well. But yeah, I mean, I tend to prefer the stuff with if not a sense of humor, at least a sense of adventure in terms of how they are dispatching people. I think that's always fun. As much shit as it gets, a movie like Jason X is not a good movie, but I watch it probably more frequently than any of the other ones because someone gets their face freeze-dried and smashed. Like, I think that's amazing. Like, there's just some things that I love ingenuity. I love the ingenuity of what, there's something that this kind of horror film does that really doesn't exist that much in other genres, and that you're not going to have like some a dramatic film that's going to go off the rails. Melodrama will only take you so far, but you can kill people in a million ways on film. And I'll always enjoy that.
So, Josh, are you telling me you're probably a huge fan of the Final Destination films?
Oh, I love the Final Destination films.
Okay.
Love them, love them. I can't wait. The can't wait for more of those. Not super splattery, but even something newer like Happy Death Day. Happy Death Day was fun, and that's got the first one.
Terrifier.
Terrifier has its moments also. Like there are those kind of movies that they try something new. Maniac, like you were mentioning earlier, is got some similar stuff in it. Yeah, that kind of stuff is kind of the direction I go.
I am a particular fan of the Italian splatter genre. So Demons, Tenebrae,
rules.
Yeah, Demons fucking rules.
It's such a good movie. And I can forgive it too, because the third act of that movie just goes completely fucking nuts.
Yeah, whatever. It's an Italian movie. They all do that. It's fine.
That's why I can forgive it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All of a sudden it's a post-apocalyptic movie. Sure. Why not?
And then, Evil Dead's, really anything Sam Raimi, like Drag Me to Hell, newer Sam Raimi, I guess not newer now. Now it's, I don't know, 20, how old is it now? Is it like 10 years old now? 10, 15 years old now?
15 years
yeah.
now.
So new to me, old to other people that might be listening to this. But yeah, I mean, and then if you want to, what really is the Venn diagram for splatter and slasher, really? I mean, I think splatter kind of started with, like you said, like Wizard of Gore and that kind of 60s super hyper color, blood everywhere, because it's just so shocking at the time to be seen on screen. And all of that just led into slashers, which, that's, I do love slashers. I have a soft spot for that. And as tropey as the characters are, there's characterization. So you know what? It might be the same characterization over and over again, but it is there. So yeah, but I'm always going to lean into Italian, but I would say Demons, definitely Demons.
Oh yeah, I got to see that the live score that toured around not too long ago. I took my son.
Oh, nice.
Because I love Demons and he loves Demons, and so we were privileged to go see
Night of the Demons. Also, I don't know how splattery that is. That's just kind of, there's more body horror aspect to that than gore.
Yeah. Some of the not necessarily all of the Saw movies, but a few of the Saw movies have that same aspect too.
Mm-hmm.
Even the worst ones, and most of them are the worst ones, have moments that are
pieces.
Creative pieces. The movie pieces is amazing.
Yes, the movie pieces. Yes, I was looking over at my collection. I'm like, what do I have over there that fits into the splatter category? And then pieces was just sticking out to me. That's a great one. That's Absolutely. Ridiculous. We should do an episode on that, Chris.
I was going to say, I've never even seen it. This is now 2 episodes in a row that it's been mentioned.
It's so good.
I mean,
so good.
Y'all have mentioned a lot of the stuff that's been mentioned, obviously, like everybody, and I'm with y'all, like Peter, I don't know. I love Peter Jackson's stuff that's not Dead Alive, but man, Dead Alive is probably the fucking greatest thing he's ever done.
Yeah.
It's so good in a way that's like, it's so good for how low budget it is, but it's also so good because you can see how much of it is just Peter Jackson and how much like we're going to see of just what that is later in his career. And it's starting right there with like one of the wackiest, goriest, grossest movies. Again, like we talked a little bit about it last week, but like Dead Alive's also just like straight up one of the nastiest fucking movies ever made. There's some, speaking of creative shit, there's some stuff in that movie that's genuinely creative that nobody else has ever done. The term rebirthing comes to mind. I guess Men did about the second closest thing to Dead Alive, but yeah, I mean, all good ones. And like you said, Josh, we're talking about the one that I haven't mentioned yet because it's kind of, it was always the one that resonated with me, but I mean, I hope it's still good. Yeah, Street Trash was a revelation when I saw it, and I'm super excited that you're super excited to talk about it as well, because yeah, Street Trash is kind of
super excited. I am not on that episode.
You don't like Street Trash?
I hate that movie.
I mean, it's an easy movie to hate. I get it.
I understand why. If you like it, I understand why. But it is, man, no.
It's an easy movie to hate, but it's also for me, it was a movie that it was so easy to love it. In the first 20 minutes, I was there. I got it. So go ahead.
It opened up some doors for me when I was younger. Like I mentioned, I started started searching outside the lines, looking outside the box for movies when I was in my teenage years, like a lot of us do. And then it's just my teenage years were in the early '90s, and finding Street Trash on VHS. One of my best friends found it, and we watched it together. And like, I didn't know movies could do that. Can movies do this?
Mhm.
It feels illegal. Like, it feels wrong.
Right.
And that's part of the charm of it. Is that it feels like someone should be in trouble for making this movie, and I enjoy that.
I agree.
Yeah. I mean, well, and that's the thing. I mean, with a movie, to come back to Rue Kitamura, like with a movie like Versus, I kind of felt the same way. I was like, holy shit, like, how did you make this? And to go further with the idea that he just took all the footage and left it on an editor's table and was like, we have no idea what we're doing. We need help. Can you help us edit this? Which is like,
can you make this into a movie, please?
Yeah, which is like
the worst thing to do is to say, can you fix the entire thing in post?
Yeah.
Number one, no.
Yeah. But to see him as a filmmaker, like to come to this movie and again, to see those same things, but also that sense of like, I'm still doing the gore thing and I'm still having fun with the gore. I like that he hasn't lost that. Cause I mean, again, Versus is what, 2000? And this is 2017. It's almost 20 years later. And he's still interested in working in this genre and hasn't gone on to be, I'm distancing myself from horror. Like he's embraced it with this movie. And this is a horror movie that's very, I don't know. I think this movie is equally as polarizing as some of the other things we've talked about, because again, some of it you have to buy into the conceit and also buy into like these characters are just dummies. So don't expect them to do anything smart. And like there will be people that would have, I'm sure, watched this movie and like they were like, I can't keep watching these people be so stupid. But I don't know. There is a level of which the film is shot with a satisfaction and glee that we're watching these people being picked apart. That is intentional on Ryohei Kitamura's part. And look, I all this is making me really do is want to go rewatch Midnight Meat Train, which I haven't seen in like the longest time. I haven't seen it since like Bradley Cooper became a thing, effective, because that was like what? That was like right at the cusp of him becoming Bradley Cooper as he.
Oh yeah,
today.
that was like right before, like I think like moments before.
Right? I think it came out the same year as The Hangover, even or 6 months before. It's like the same time.
I think it was the same year. It's the Bradley Cooper of 1 year later would not have made Midnight Meat Train.
No, not at all. But that's it. That's like a movie I really want to revisit because I have not seen it. But yeah, it came out in 2008, and I mean, The Hangover came out, I think, literally the same year, right? Yeah, 2009 came out.
2009.
Yeah, it came out the next year. But yeah. Well, now that he's cashing those Marvel checks, why would you ever do anything weird and interesting and different? Just go put on a fake nose and be Leonard Bernstein. Yeah, Bradley Cooper's had a weird career. Given the first thing I saw him in, I treated Jess to us watching the Anthony Bourdain adaptation of his book, which Bradley Cooper was in on Fox for 13 episodes. So
that was the first thing you saw him in?
Yeah.
Oh, at the time, yeah.
Yeah, when like 2005, yeah. Well, I guess I saw him in like Wedding. The other thing was like Wedding Crashers, where he was the dickhead, like that was going with Rachel McAdams. But
I think Hangover was the first time I'd saw like really like known who he was.
Right.
And then Midnight Meat Train I saw later. And I was like, oh, I really like this movie. Weird that he did this.
Yeah, like you said, Josh, there's no way the post Hangover Bradley Cooper touches Midnight Meat Train. Like in a lot of ways, it reminds me of like the things Robert Downey Jr. was doing right before Iron Man. Like
it's like Jennifer Aniston and Leprechaun and then Friends. Like
not touching that genre ever again. Yeah, boy, what a shame. Well, starting with you, Josh, and then Jess, final thoughts on Downrange.
I really like the film. It's not a perfect film. It has, the seams do show with the budget level and some of the acting, I think, could be stronger. But having had this conversation with you both, it's actually allowed me to sort of go through my thoughts more critically and appreciate some things that I maybe didn't appreciate as much the first time around. So yeah, I it's a thumbs up from me. Like I enjoy it, and if you're okay with a really mean movie, then this is a really mean movie.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think that it is this is good for somebody who hasn't seen too many of these types of movies, who's not as inundated with the slasher, just people trapped in a situation genre. I think the gore is great. I think, the acting is fine. I didn't think anything was particularly egregious for the type of movie it was. The stunt is great at the end. That's awesome. But for me, I don't need to watch it again. But I wouldn't say don't watch this movie at all. That's not what I'm saying. I think that it definitely is there to serve a purpose. It's definitely a good, usher in type of movie, because there always needs to be those movies for the newer generation. So I think I think this is a good one for that.
Yeah, I would agree. If you're looking for a relatively slick, fast, lean movie for the most part, I mean, we've mentioned it's 90 minutes. Like, if this movie had been 2 hours, I don't think we would have enjoyed it as much, given
absolutely
the
not.
lack of certain things. Yeah. But I think maybe if it was 2 hours, we would have been complaining that maybe it wasn't done well enough, or there was too much of it, or who knows what. I mean, again, there's an alternate universe where this movie is 15, 20 minutes longer, and we're lamenting it not being 90 minutes. So I don't know, like Jess mentioned, and like you've said, Josh, like, this is a movie that I will probably check out again in the future. And this is a movie there are certain people I could show this movie to that probably get a good rise out of their reactions with some of the stuff that happens, particularly the first 20, 30 minutes of people just getting like shot with wanton abandon. But yeah, I mean, it's a good starter movie. It's gory enough. I know that plenty of the gore hounds out there probably saw this movie, were like, there's not enough. And I get it. Like, I could have had more even towards the end of the movie in terms of like the killer getting mutilated. I would have loved to see the killer really get it, but that's not what the movie's promising, and that's not what we get. But yeah, I enjoyed this movie. It was fun, and it kind of fits nicely into the other things I've seen this month, while also standing on its own as kind of a weird movie that, again, it's kind of on its own path in a lot of ways. It knows where it is in the scheme of things, but it's also very much its own thing. So yeah, on that note, we'll take a break, play some ads, and play a preview for The Next Culture.
From Weirding Way Media, Cambridge and Wishawn is a podcast about two guys' obsessions, passions, and hobbies. Those two guys are
Mark Begley, host of Wake Up Heavy, Recollections of Horror,
and Ronald Zerigian, host of the Skelevator YouTube channel.
Each month we talk about the toys, comics, movies, books, TV shows, and other cultural phenomena that captured our imaginations and helped shape who we are today.
From Masters of the Universe to Saturday Night Live, Star Wars to Harry Houdini, The Muppets to The Elephant Man, Ronnie and Mark dive deep into the recesses of their minds to pull out treasured memories of things lost but never forgotten.
Join us on the first Tuesday of each month over at weirdingwaymedia.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Join me, Jamie Benning, on the Filmumentaries podcast, particularly if you enjoy stories like designer Nilo Rodis Jamiro convincing George Lucas to push him around to help gain the support of his crew on the ailing Howard the Duck.
Blam! The door opens, it's George. Everybody gasps. George makes a beeline to me. I'm literally back against the wall.
Or hear puppeteer Tim Rose's emotional story behind that iconic Admiral Akbar shot in Return of the Jedi.
I believe that war is something to be proud of, but not to celebrate.
Or how Star Wars editor Paul Hirsch tackled cutting so many successful films.
The thing that I learned from working with De Palma is that tension depends on a clock. You need to have the sense that time is running out.
Maybe Oscar-winning sound designer Mark Mangini's insightful chat about his work on Blade Runner 2049.
Not a single sound from the original Blade Runner in the new film. A great deal of inspiration.
That's the Filmumentaries podcast with me, Jamie Benning.
Hello, Twisted Humans. Do you find yourself wanting to know more about the latest murder, conspiracy, cult, or haunting? Then this is the podcast for you. In 1952, there was a record high of UFOs reported. 1,500 sightings. There has been evidence of human sacrifice, devil worship, and it is haunted by more spirits than can be counted. A family of 2 adults and 2 kids reportedly saw a giant flying thing with glowing red eyes.
And meanwhile, the family's nanny that helped Veronica to care for her and Lucian's children was found bludgeoned to death in the basement of their family home.
I'm Alicia. And I'm Sierra, and this is Twisted and Uncorked.
I don't need this.
Are you tired of the same old routine?
My wife, my
busting your hump and getting nowhere?
This just ain't my day.
The boss, is he always on your back?
Nice, the ass belongs in your chair, not in your lap, which is where you keep trying to put it. You bastard!
The wife.
You know?
And the kids.
Is that right?
They never listen.
I hate to see him pissing his life away on them goddamn computers.
Do you ever feel like forgetting the whole thing?
You think I got it easy?
Well, now you can.
I'm talking about life!
Drop out and join the ranks of the few. The filthy. The trash.
I got my own place, a condominium.
Where else can you live for free? And eat for even less? Well, be forewarned. Freedom has its price. Yes, there's always a snake in the Garden of Eden.
What you got for me today?
Today, Tenafly Viper. $1.
Here's to you, pussy. Don't drink my Viper. What? What's the matter? You can't hold your liquor, huh?
Street trash. It's easy to find us. We're all over the place. Street trash.
Right on the next Culture Cast, we're going to be talking about the aforementioned Street Trash, which is, I mean, it was the one that everybody was clamoring and fighting to be on. So I'm looking forward to talking about it with you, Josh, and Spencer Parsons, who's a film professor at Northwestern. So until then, where can people find you and the things that you work on, Josh?
You can find me at Hateful Josh on Twitter. That's pretty much the only public thing you can find me on, but I talk a lot, so there's plenty of stuff to find.
Jess?
You can find me on Instagram these days for the most part at Practiced Amateur. It's pretty much where my photography and things that I'm working on go. A couple movies that I worked on earlier or last year, 2023, are coming out soon. So I'll probably be promoting those on that channel so you can see that stuff coming around.
Baby Oopsie, one of those? Baby Oopsie Part 3?
No, I didn't work on the third one.
More oopsieing
I
with
didn't
the
work
baby.
on the second one.
And as for me, you can find me at Weirding Way Media, where I do this show and a whole host of other things, but there's plenty of other shows worth checking out that I have nothing to do with other than producing or just giving a place to post. So yeah, weirdingwaymedia.com. As for this show, culturecast.com. It's where you can get almost every episode of the show, other than if you head on over to the Patreon and get in on the $10 level. That's where you can find the only version of this show or these episodes that are for pay. We do a bonus episode every month. We do take requests. That's one of the Patreon levels. And also, if you're in at the $10 level, you get access to Rankin' on Bond, which is me, the Projection Booth's Mike White, and DC Titans, Mothman Prophecies, Richard Haddam, sitting down to talk James Bond once a month, which, you know, the world needs 3 more white guys talking about James Bond. At least one of us is gay. I'll let you figure out which one it is. It's me. So at least it's a little more diverse, but 3 white guys talking about James Bond. If you're into it, cool. Go check it out at patreon.com/cool. Josh and Jess, thank you so much for joining me. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed the conversation, and I have a different and deeper appreciation for the movie after having this conversation with y'all. So, yeah. And as always, we'll catch you on the next episode.